everyone, it's Kate. I'm going to be covering the cost prices on Prima today, so where your cost prices pull from. So let's just log into Prima. Any questions that you have, you can speak to Ollie, who's going to be on the chat. Okay, so the first place that we're going to look at for the cost prices in the publications and catalogues. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Vow catalogue and take a look at one of the items. When you import your catalogue files, the catalogue files don't contain the true pricing for the products that are in the catalogues. This is contained in the terms file. So when the terms files are applied, you'll be able to see the date that the terms file was applied, and in here it will read EDC terms import. However, at the moment it's reading data file import. That would mean that the latest terms file haven't been applied, and therefore you'd need to contact the supplier if the supplier is an EDI supplier to get the terms reapplied to the FTP site after the catalogue import. Alternatively, if you do manual terms files, then you'd need to have a look at our online help site, and there we've got a guide on importing terms files manually. If the terms have been applied and the cost price is shown incorrect in this field here, then you need to contact the supplier directly in regards to the pricing query, as that's been what's placed in the terms file. The cost price in the catalogue will then ripple through to the stock code depending on the pricing method that you've got set up. So if we have a look at this item here, this item's got preferred supplier last price as the pricing method. So the product unit and pricing tab will be updated based on what the preferred supplier last price was for the code. This works when in the supplier tab you have a preferred supplier set. In this instance where there's no preferred supplier set, what can happen is the cost price can pull through incorrectly into the product unit and pricing tab and onto the sales order, as Prima doesn't know where to look to collect the cost price. Therefore, you need to make sure that if your preferred supplier last price is your pricing method, you have preferred supplier set for the code. This can be done through housekeeping, and there's a grid manager that can be found on the online help site, a guide on how to update products so that they have got a preferred supplier. When preferred supplier last price is set in the product and there's a preferred supplier set, that will be the price that pulls onto your sales order. If the supplier changes that price on the purchase order and writes back a different cost price, when the goods are receipted in, the product unit and pricing tab will update in the stock product, and when the goods are dispatched out, the sales order will update to whatever the supplier said on the acknowledgement file. Therefore, the pricing will update to be whatever your preferred supplier last price was. We also have the pricing method manual. So this should be used, for example, for own codes where you update the pricing manually. So if you have stock of your own items, what you do is you'd set manual as the pricing method and update it in the product unit and pricing tab for that code. And in here you could go in and amend the cost manually. There is also an option for cheapest supplier. So cheapest supplier can be used when you want to select the cheapest supplier for the goods. However, the cheapest supplier pricing method will only work if you have the supplier set up to be included in the cheapest calculation. For example, if you set cheapest supplier as the pricing method and none of the suppliers were set up as the cheapest, then they won't be included in the pricing calculation. In this product here, we can see that both suppliers have been included in the cheapest calculation. Therefore, Prima would pick the cheapest price out of these two. If you don't want any suppliers to be included in the cheapest calculation, then they shouldn't be included in there. Otherwise, Prima will use the cost price to calculate on. The implications of using the pricing method cheapest supplier can be relating to carriage charges. So if you're buying products from various different suppliers, then you're going to incur carriage charges from all these different suppliers, rather than sending one order to one supplier who's going to only charge you a carriage charge once. Another option is fluctuating on actual cost. This should only barely be used when you have stock of items, because the cost price will fluctuate based on the cost of the batches that are in stock. In regards to that, if an item's to be allocated from stock, this will also pull from the batch price. So if you go into the balances and the batch records, if you have stock of an item, a line will exist here, and it will show the date that the batch was created, so the date that the goods were purchased, and the quantity received and remaining. There's also a unit price here, so the unit price will be the cost of each unit that you've got stock of. The current value will show the total of the quantity. So say if you had 5 in stock and they were cost at £1 each, then the current value would be £5. If you wanted a different price to pull through onto the sales order than that of the current batch in stock, you'd have to go in and amend this line manually so that the cost price remains true on the sales order. With allocations, whatever cost is against the batch will pull through onto the order. However, once the goods have been dispatched out, if this cost is amended manually on the sales order rather than in the batch, you'd have to update the sales order afterwards using the maintenance tool if you've not changed the cost against the batch prior to dispatching the goods out, because once the goods are dispatched out, then that cost price that's against the batch will write back to the sales order. If you are purchasing a line from a supplier and you want to change the price, you want to change the supplier that you're purchasing from, as if you have preferred supplier set, it will pull through the preferred by default. This can be done in the requirements. If you go into the requirements screen and look at the requested lines, see if I've got any products. For example, this KF code here. If there was an alternative supplier, what you could do is you could double click into that line and that will automatically update the supplier against that code. Therefore, when the goods are dispatched out, the cost that you've paid for that supplier will write back to the sales order. I think we got quite a few things covered here in this session today in regards to the cost pricing. If you've got any further questions on how the cost pricing pulls through and how it's updated, we're going to be hanging around on the chat for us to speak to. And also next week we'll be holding a Twitter poll to discuss what the next webinar is going to be next week. Thank you for listening and watching.